Good morning, everybody. Today is the 30th day of the month of Nisan. It's the first day of Rosh Chodesh Iyar. It's the 19th day of April. And here we are again. We are in the midst of studying the book, The Art of Giving, and we are on page 42-43. We have learned until now when the Torah introduces the death of Sarah, it introduces Sarah as being 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. That is an unusual way of describing years. And the Rebbe explained it according to the mystical message that the Torah is sending over here, which is that when you talk singles or single units, that's the 7 years. It's reference to the characteristics. And those are single digits, necessarily single digits. They are, each one is defined in a different way, although, of course, they all work together in tandem, but they are single digits. The 20 is a reference to the intellect, which is wisdom and understanding, that they must go together. Wisdom cannot be understood without understanding, and understanding cannot make any sense without wisdom. So they work in tandem, so they are together. They are two, but they are magnified as 20 because they are much more than the characteristics. Intellect is much more powerful, much more in control, and much more something that a human being is blessed with, unlike animals that only have characteristics. They can only be angry or peaceful or whatever. The humans can also think and innovate and create, and therefore intellect is magnified in the 20, not just 2. And so that's the 20 years, and the 100 is a reference to the deeper levels within a person, above intellect, the willpower we talked about the desire, we talked about pleasure, and the different elements that go deeper within the human being that are not defined to one specific place. Hopefully people think with their brains, not with other parts of their bodies, and that's where thinking remains. And then but every other part of the body is involved with a will and a desire and a pleasure. As I said many times, that when a person says, I want to do something, he can't say, I know my little pinky doesn't want it, but we're not going to consider the opinion of the little pinky today. You can't say that. And also the same thing with desire. You can't say, I really desire to travel to London, but I'm not sure if my tongue wants to go. What? And the same thing with pleasure. If you're enjoying something to the extent that you are receiving pleasure from it, you can't have something bothering you. Something bothers you, something sitting on your head, you're not going to have the pleasure that you want to have. It's going to be lacking and it's going to be missing, and that's not really pleasure. I went on this trip, but it was raining for half of the days. Well, then what you're saying is I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I could have enjoyed it. I feel like I wasted some of my time, but that's not considered proper pleasure. So that's the 100. Last week we spoke about the name Sarah. That's all we did last week. The name Sarah means the princess. It means someone who is in charge. And remember that Sarah wasn't always Sarah. She was Sarai, which means my princess. And when she was 90, she had lived 90 years in this world, God said, I'm changing your name to, she was actually 89, I'm changing your name to Sarah, not anymore Sarai. Sarai meaning my princess, Abraham's princess, and now you're everyone, the Sarah of the world. Then she had a baby. And then she died 37 years later, when Isaac was 37 years old and he was taken on for the binding of Isaac. This word Sarah, meaning the princess, putting the hey at the end of it instead of a yud makes it I, like Sarai, and the hey makes it Sarah. The hey is a H in English with a h sound. That turns her into the general queen. What's the queen? The queen is a reference to the lowest level of all of the worlds. All of the worlds have this level. It's called Malchus, rulership, kingship. We spoke about this at great length last week. That's what Shabbos is, the 7th day of the week. It's the 7th characteristic. It's a feminine. It's a Shabbos queen. it is a reference to rulership, the king and the queen. So it's this is a feminine level. The reason why it's feminine is because it's the bottom of the pot. No, I'm only kidding. The reason why it's feminine is because the female is built to be a receiver. She receives from the man, and with that she produces the next level or the next generation in the practical sense. So in this case, we're talking about Malchus, or the seventh characteristic, the seventh level, which is the level that receives, that collects from all the previous ones. And now that the energy has reached to that level, now the unit is complete, and we can now go on to produce the next level, the next world. So within that Malchus, within that level, although it is a level on its own, the level on its own is a reference to rulership, meaning you're in control of yourself, self-reflection. What have I done? Where am I now that I have a whole unit? That's what Shabbos is really. Now that I have the energy of the week we have prepared, what am I doing with it? And how am I preparing for the next week? That's what Shabbos is. It's the ultimate goal, because now we've prepared, we've had all the week to prepare. Now that you've prepared, the food is good, all right. Now what about the behavior? What about the connection to God? And so we have time to reflect. We release ourselves from the weekday, the mundane activities, and we're focused on the important activities, which is God and family and community. That's what Shabbos really represents. It's a beautiful day. It's a brilliant idea. I would think because it's not simply a rest. It's more of an elevation. You're not resting. I don't rest on Shabbos. I'm up early and I'm busy preparing things to say, and we're preparing food, and there's work. Shabbos is a day of work. It doesn't mean to rest from work. It means to rest from creative work, from mundane work, from weekday activity, and to hold yourself on a higher plane, and focus on things that are really that important in our lives. Which again, there's nothing more important than God, family, and community, and friends and neighbors and. So that's what it is. It's about self-reflection, but it is also a preparation for the next week. We take with us that which we've elevated, and now we can go to the next week in a different way. And then we start again. It's every single week. We go through the same number of days, and it's the same setup. Sunday is this day, and Monday is that day, and so on. All in preparation for Shabbos. So when you say Sarah rather than Sarai, the name Sarah, and that's how the verse ends with 120 and 7. These were the years of Sarah. Sarah meaning a complete unit. She is the queen, the rulership over all, and that's God's way of coming to this world. It comes through the level of Malchus, the level of the feminine level. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, is also a feminine attribute of God. So those who say that God is a male is being silly, is not understanding what God is, and those who say God is a she is also being silly, because it's not. God isn't a she and God isn't a he. God is everything. God is not limited by anyone. He created both of them for different reasons. And it's a representation that sometimes he appears as a male, and sometimes he appears in the feminine vernacular. And so she becomes. This is the Malchus level. The Malchus level of every world collects the energy that God has projected into each of the worlds, and it begins to prepare for the coming world. That's how God chooses to project his divine energy into this world, because each one of and it has a series of worlds, and each world has different levels. It's a series of filters until you can get from the omnipresent divine essence to a world that we have here. That's what it means. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso La'olam Va'ed. The second verse of Shema. We say, blessed is the name of the glory of the kingdom of God. Malchuso, that kingdom, that Malchus, that kingship that we talk about. That kingship is a reference to the lowest levels of all of the world. That is the ultimate level of kingship. And that is the feminine level, by the way, which is what Sarah represents. The name Sarah represents that. And the Hey that was added also represents that, because the letter Hey has a length and a breadth and a width. The letter Hey is shaped this way, and this way. It's got all three sides to it. Not all letters have that. So a three-pronged side level represents an expansion and an extension, not just a collection of energy, but also a projection to the next world, to the next level. And that's where we are. Page 42, second paragraph, begins with the word now. Now, while Sarah corresponds to Malchus, Malchut, the kingship, the sovereignty, the life of Sarah, which is what the verse says. The verse says again, and the days of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, the years of the life of Sarah. That's how the verse says, and it's a very strange. The Torah doesn't talk like that usually. Mm-hmm. So by saying that, the life of Sarah, let's see here, Sarah corresponds to Malchus. When you say the life of Sarah, that was 100 years, corresponds to the level of 100, and is associated with the 100 blessings one is required to recite each day. Thus, I would say, and we went through this before, and we'll pay attention to it in a second and again. Thus, our sages say, on the verse, there is a verse in the fifth book of the Torah, the third portion of the fifth book of the Torah. It's in the fifth reading of the third portion of the fifth book. And it says over there, and now Jews, Moses is saying, now Jews, what is God asking of you? All he wants you is to fear him. Fear him, doesn't mean be scared of him, but it means be wary of him, that he's around. And when God is around, you behave yourself. When even someone else, if the governor is around, you'd be a little bit more respectful and honorable, and you'd be embarrassed to say something or do something that would be considered silly or boorish or whatever. You wouldn't do that in the company of people who are not that way. And so if God is around, then obviously, if we are constantly aware of God, we would never do anything that should be inappropriate in God's eyes. So Moses says to the Jewish people, and now Jews, what is God asking of you? Ma means what? Ma nishtana. What is God asking from you? All he wants you is to fear him. And of course, the Talmud says, oh, really? That's all he wants? That's a simple thing, right? What does he want? He just wants you to be aware of him 24/7. Which, if that would happen, this world would be Mashiach. There wouldn't be a problem in this world, because everybody would be aware of God and everybody would do the right thing. It's not a simple thing. It's, in fact, very, very difficult, darn difficult. So the Talmud says, well, relative to Moses, yeah, that's a simple thing. So the Rebbe in Tanya, the first Rebbe of Chabad, writes in his Tanya, he says, but he wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to the rest of the Jewish people. He wasn't asking of himself, what does God want from you? He was asking from the people. All he wants you to do is fear him. So, yes, to Moses it sounded like a small thing, but he had to be aware of who he was talking to. And so, in Tanya he says, he goes into this at great length, that every single Jew has a piece of Moses in him or her. And that's the innate, deep soul level of a Jew that is connected to God in a way that is unprecedented anywhere else. And therefore, one always has the opportunity to dig down and find that Moses, that connection. Anyway, but over here, this This verse is used in the Talmud elsewhere to tell us a very special thing, and that is that word ma, what is God asking of you, actually is missing just one letter in it. Not missing as in it's lacking, somebody's throwing it out, but sometimes the words in the Torah are there to give us another deeper meaning to it if you just add one little word. Well, I'm sorry, one little letter, the letter Aleph. If you put the letter Aleph in the word ma, in between the mem and the hey, you get a me'ah. Me'ah means 100. Me'ah. Me'ah. Not may I, but me'ah. And therefore, now when we read the verse this way, it says, and now, what does God, 100 is God asking from you. Not what is God, which is the word ma, but 100 is God asking from you. What 100? What kind of 100 is he asking? He's asking of the Jewish people to make 100 blessings every day.
So it's actually written with an olive?
No. The Talmudic sages share with us that when you read this word, because the aleph is it can be sometimes a silent letter, as could be a hey, as can be a vav. They can be silent letters. That means you just don't pronounce it, which is the interesting makeup of the composition of the Hebrew letters. That some of them are silent, and some of them are this, some of them are that. But this particular letter, aleph, can be a silent letter. If it's in the middle of a verse or the beginning of a word or somewhere in the middle, it's ahava, which means love. But there are other words like leimor, which has an aleph in it for grammatic purposes, but you don't pronounce that. It's not leimor, it's leimor, and the aleph is just silent. So the aleph can be a silent letter. It's like saying night in English. For some crazy reason, it has a GH in it. And when they were changing the S's to Z's, they didn't take out the AGH and just put an I in there or something. It comes from German, because German is Nacht. And so the GH is the Ch, and that's why you have bright and might. And all of those are German words which have Ch's in them. But anyway, the Hebrew, come to learn Kabbalah Coffee, you'll learn English as well. The Hebrew, the some letters are silent. So this letter can be put in if you want. The sages do this every once in a while to teach us lessons from the Torah. Not that the Torah isn't explained on the surface. This is what is happening now. You have to learn the Torah in its simple meaning. And its simple meaning, by the way, is not so simple either. Not translation. When you read the Bible from other translations, if it's not written by a Jew who is aware of what the sages say about this Torah, you have no idea what the Torah is saying. No idea. They are reading translation, which means nothing. And they struggle over this, what's going on over here? But our sages did the struggle for us already. And a lot of it's in the oral Torah. And we know what the Torah is saying when it says, for example, and bind these as a sign on your hand. It doesn't give you any more detail. You sit in a booth on the festival of Sukkot. What's a booth? What? How? And so on. And so we know all these things because we learn them out from translation is not the way to learn Torah. It's the translation with explanation. And that means that you got to get a Torah that is written by an observant Jew, a learned, observant Jew.
Like a Stone edition.
Stone edition is one. The Gutnick edition. Any of those editions, a Living Torah, any of those editions won't have in it a misleading idea. And in the bottom, they'll tell you, although the simple meaning is this, but our sages teach us a result of that, and the other, that this is the way it needs to be understood. It's all in context and all in that. So any Bible that's simply translated, King James Version, you go with any of that, first of all, they miss translations anyway, and sometimes purposefully. And anyway, even if they didn't, even if they translated everything faithfully, it wouldn't make sense.
Is Mamre Mechon.
Say that again. I'm sorry. Start that again.
Mamre Mechon M-A-M-R-E.
Machon Mamre. Machon Mamre.
I say it backwards.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's what I use online
That's
all
good.
the time to check it.
That's pretty good, but that's very, very basic. There's no explanation there whatsoever. That's a legitimate for English. But I also have over here, whatever I have here is outside of here in the shul, in the library, are translations of the Torah and of the prophets as well. Those are legitimate books that you can take and study from them, because they'll translate everything properly. Let's just give you one simple example. Everybody knows about the Virgin Mary, which is that's rewriting history. We know the history of that man because he started off with us, and they prove it from somewhere in Isaiah where it says, "And the young maiden would go," and they translate that to the young virgin. That's all. They just change a little bit. That's all. They just change the word Alma, which means everywhere where you read this, it means a young maiden, to the virgin, and that was it. And this myth, billions of people continue to believe in. It mistranslated one word. And on, and on, and on. There's examples of this that are rampant. It's not just one or two
And
places.
when Isaiah meant Betula, he used Betula.
Yes, when he says virgin, there is a word for virgin in Hebrew, and that's not the word.
What was that? His friend, your friend?
Oh, yeah. Amy Rose,
Yeah. She came for one of the days of Passover.
last Saturday.
And she asked for her name
Yeah.
and the origin of her name, and what was it?
Her name is Amy Rose, but the origin is
Immaculate.
wow. Immaculate. Immaculate.
Yes, what's it, the origin of your
She's
name?
Catholic.
That's what her name is.
Origin
She's
is
Ugandan.
origin is so I said that sounds like a perfect name. Anyway.
They really, by the way, and coming from someone like
They're beautiful people.
they really were very nice.
Very nice. They were very, very nice people, and they didn't mess around. I just asked.
They
was
loved
my-
it. They
yeah.
really were very impressed with everything.
Rabbi, we have
I wish we can get the Jews to be that impressed. Go ahead.
we have a Tanakh, but all that gives you is a footnote here and there, and there's something.
You mean the green book?
Well, ours has to be brown.
A brown,
It's
yeah.
art school.
But is there
Yeah.
like
That's
a
fine.
is
It's
there a
not as
version
complete.
of the
Yes.
rest of the books
Yes.
that like the
Yes.
Chumash that gives you commentary,
Yes.
full
Over
commentary?
Yes, I have Isaiah. I have Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, and Isaiah.
Oh, so
What about
it's per
Tehillim?
book.
What about
Tehillim, you have
Psalms?
hundreds of them. Yeah. Oh, that's around everywhere. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We have two thick books somewhere.
Is there something online that's quick to get to?
No, see, the books will be not online because they want to sell their books.
I know.
But that's why you have to come to our library.
There's nothing like
No.
that, but better. That I can
That you
use
have over here. You can always come
Nothing
here.
else online?
You can take it and borrow it.
Study
I
hall's
mean, I
open.
have some at home. It's
The
just-
synagogue's open every.
Get it.
Synagogue's open 24/7 here, unless we're out of town. Unless we leave, then we have to close. Anyway, back to here.
I
So
like those.
to answer the question, it was important to get into this just to answer the question. Were our sages changing something in the Torah now? No, they weren't adding anything to the Torah. God forbid, heaven forbid. You add something to the Torah, you're no good. The Torah says that straight out. Do not add anything. Do not. You may think, and I know I will deviate here, but it's important for me to say this. You may think 4 corners for tzitzis? I'll make 5 corners. I'll have another tzitzis hanging out. Don't do that. Don't add and don't take away. And I think I once told this story about the guy who came to his neighbor and he says, "Hey, tomorrow I'm having a major party. Can I borrow your set of your set of cutlery?" And the guy says, "Oh, okay. When are you returning it?" "Tomorrow." "Yeah, okay, sure." He comes tomorrow, and he returns it. He says, "There's an extra couple of spoons over here." Guy says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You know that your cutlery was pregnant, and it gave birth to a couple of extra spoons." The neighbor says, "This guy's whacked," but I'm not complaining. Hey, he wants to give me another couple of spoons. Hey, it's a good job. few weeks later, the guy knocks on the door again. He says, "Can I have your cutlery?" He says, "Sure, no problem. Here it is." And sure enough, the next day he returns it with a couple more forks. He says, "Yeah, it gave birth to forks." And this went on. It gave birth to some knives and some smaller forks, and this was a good deal. The guy was making another set. Anyway, one time he takes the set and comes back the next day empty-handed. And he says, "I'm so sorry, but there was a major fight, and they all killed each other. They were all dead." So the guy says, "You out of your mind? You Meshuggah? Give me my thing back. These guys don't die. They don't have any fights and everything else." He says, "Oh, when it gave birth, you were happy to accept that from me. But now that they died, then all of a sudden the cutlery can't do anything. Cutlery doesn't live." And that is a parable. That's a mushal, an example that is used for people who want to add things to the Torah. People add things to the Torah, in the end, you're going to end up losing everything. Because once we start deciding, it's sin with diminishing. We change things and we augment things and we fundamental things. You can't say no. You can't say, yes, you can do this if you're doing that. There's no such thing. When it says no, is no. Many people ask me, can I drive to Shabbos, to Shul on Shabbos? You say, you're asking me to allow you to do something the Torah says don't do. How can I do that? He said, well, I'm going to drive to the movies. I said, if you're driving to the movies, to make a stop at the shul, please. But I'm not going to tell you to drive to shul. That's ridiculous. I can't allow someone to do something the Torah says don't do. Doesn't matter what the purpose is for. But if you're anyway going out, you're going shopping, you're going somewhere else, right? You know what? Then you can stop at my place. Gesundheit hate. I give you permission.
So how is this not adding to the Torah when they add the olive?
Good. I was just getting to that. So therefore, what is this here? They're not adding an aleph. You will not find the Sefer Torah with an extra aleph there. If it had an aleph, that Sefer Torah would be invalid. You'd have to get rid of it. You'd never be able to use it for a Sefer Torah. No, it doesn't have an aleph. The sages are teaching us that in addition to the general message, the simple meaning of the verse, that Moses was talking to the people and he was telling them, what do you think God is? All he wants from you is to do this. He was also telling them, at the same time, he was alluding to it, and we are not adding that aleph, we're just hearing what the allusion was, that if you want to fear God, make 100 blessings every day. It's what we call remez. Remez means it's an illusion. Allusion, not illusion. Illusion means that you see things that you don't see. But allusion means it's alluding to something. It's alluding to the fact that there is, you can look at a word, and see how to read it from all different angles. And the Torah is designed that way. People say, why couldn't God just put the whole Talmud into the Torah? And therefore save all the problems of oral Torah. Just make the written Torah very big. And the answer is you won't be able to get to the end of it, just like you can't get to the end of the Talmud. So everything is concise, but concise in the hands of God. So every single thing is in the Torah. So when the rabbis today want to find out about in vitro fertilization, end of life matters in today that we have scans, law pertaining to switches on Shabbos. Can you do it this way and that way? People who are creative and do Shabbos things this way. These are all things that you find in the Torah. It's all there. You just have to find them. That's why you need great experts, scholars, people who understand. In the kosher production today, the things are so different. You don't go to a place and you open up a few eggs and you put. It doesn't work that way. Today it's all industrialized, and you have to understand chemicals and everything else. I went once to a soap factory in North Carolina to do kosher supervision. Now, why would anybody need kosher soap? We're not eating soap. But this was hand soap, and they were using it in kitchens, and there were certain groups that didn't want to buy it if it didn't have a kosher certification. So I went down there, spent a whole day with the chemist on the premises, going through the chemicals. And I had to study each and every chemical. What is it? Where is it coming from? Where is it going? And it was a chemist day. It was a whole day, a day's work. I was on the computer. They printed out all of the ingredients, and some of them I had to get rid of. I had to get rid of 7 of them. I couldn't say that they were kosher. Some of them were made with what do you call that? It's from the animal.
Glycerin?
Tallow. Some soaps are made with tallow. Tallow was animal fat from its pores. Anyway, we couldn't use that. But I gave a certification for 43 different soaps. I had to watch them produce it and make it, and how to clean it out from one to the other, and the whole process. And I would go every couple of months, maybe 2-3 months. I would go down there until the guy who was bringing me in, he sold his share and he wasn't doing it anymore. So they took off my kosher, and that's it. But today you can't just simply walk into a place and it's all made in it's industrial. Even when you're dealing with the small bakeries, they're getting big drums of stuff that's coming from who knows where. So everything is in the Torah. Everything is there, except you have to find it. And this is one of the ways that the Torah alludes to different things, although it's not clear. A lot of things are not clear. Shabbos isn't even as clear as it is in the Talmud afterwards, because if every detail was in the Torah, was in the written Torah, you wouldn't want to hold it. You wouldn't want to dance with it in Simchas Torah. You would never get to the end of it. Here we have a very good situation. The situation is that once a year you go through it. And you know what? Every single year you come by and you find something else. I was writing the Good Shabbos email. I'm doing this now for over 10 years. And every single week I'm giving something else out. I haven't missed a week. Not a single week where I haven't given something. I have given things out from the previous years, but something goes out every week. And then it comes to certain Torah portions. This week, one of them, that are just that's so difficult to find a pertinent message. This week talks about diseases of skin, which is a defunct disease. The whole thing doesn't. And then when you get to the end of it, it talks about flows from men and from women, and you want to take a shower when you finish with this thing. It's a very tough portion. And I've had to work very hard. And some of my best writings have been from these weeks because I had to work so hard, and it doesn't come automatically. And when I finished and it's gone out and a stone is off my heart and I finally, completed it, I say to myself, how am I ever going to find something for next year? I think I've canvassed the entire portion, and that's all I've found. That's it. And for 10 years I've been saying the same thing. I finally stopped saying that to myself because the Torah is endless. It is absolutely endless. Yes, some weeks you have to work hard on that, but it's so much in there. And you say, why didn't I see this last year? Because it wasn't time for you to see it last year. And that's how Torah works. The Torah is amazing because it's every single year you come by and, people like me have been studying this for 40 years, straight every single week. Oh, the next portion. I know every single word by heart. What more can I find? What more treasures? Amazing. No end. And not just me, everyone. People all over the world are studying it every single week. And it's like a non-ending flow of wellspring. That's what the Torah is. That's why it's impossible to read it as a translation. It's not a book. It's a life. That's what the Torah is. It's living. And it's always going to be living. And when we finish the Amidah, we say, may you rebuild the temple speedily in our days and give us our portion in your Torah.
Which means what?
Means that we all have an opportunity to study the Torah and find things there. Everyone can innovate something. The Ramban, Nachmanides, one of the greatest sages of Jewish history. He had a student whose name was Avner. And the Ramban one day told his students that every single one of you is inside of the Torah. And he was somewhat of a skeptical guy. When he heard that, he said, you know what, you've crossed the red line. I'm out of here. And he dropped down. A couple of years later, he came back, totally non-observant, everything else. And the rabbi said, hey, I haven't seen you for so long. What happened to you? He says, when you made that statement, I figured that, you know what, this is just too fanatical. This is ridiculous. Where's my name in the Torah? He says, oh, sure, yeah, I'll show you right here. And he showed him that if every third letter in 5 straight words towards the end of the Torah, in the song where Moses warns the Jewish people before he dies, every third letter has his name. It's Reb Avner, with a resh as well. Reb and Aleph, Vet, Nun, Resh. Every word, every third letter of every consecutive word has his name in there. He said, here it is. Except that verse says, I will destroy them, I will get angry with them, I'll wipe their memory out. And the story goes, I heard this story from the Rebbe. The story goes that he got into a boat, a rowboat, and sailed off, and I've never seen from again. That was his repentance.
About,
Huh?
I said he went about hour. That's for the Vikings. That's how the Vikings
This
end
is
their lives.
Abner. He
Oh,
took
I,
off.
I wouldn't know about the Viking. I have enough trouble catching up with the Torah. What?
This is Abner. He just took off. After
Took off and he just disappeared.
Wow.
Because he realized that all he needed to do is if such a great rabbi says something, you're allowed to question. In fact, you're supposed to question. Hey, we asked the 4 questions at the Seder. We push questions. He didn't ask the question, so he was wrong. But then when he saw the verse, he said, you know what? The Torah has everything, and everyone as well. We're all in there. And we all have an opportunity to innovate and to extrapolate, providing that anybody can read the Torah and take anything they want out of it. That's just the way it is. But
Now that they have more Torah computerized, they're finding all kinds of codes.
Yeah.
Rabbi Daneman, the one that came here and talked about the mezuzahs, he's a sofer. He has this whole presentation about finding, the portion that talks about Moses. You find Moses' names, like, every 40 letters, with the Mem and the Shin and the Hey, and the Megillah found all that code about the
1946,
yeah,
the 10 sons of Haman and the 10 Nazis.
guys who were behind
Yes.
what's it called, laws?
Nuremberg trials. Anyway, so and that's how the Torah is. You can see it computed, but you don't even need that because everything is in. When you study Talmud, which we are going to start a class in Talmud as the new facility is prepared, you will see how the Talmud takes apart verses and shows us, that opens up your eyes to things that wow. That's what the Torah is. The Talmud is a wow.
I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Because I've never studied Talmud.
Oh, Talmud is. Talmud is. And that's how Judaism is. Everything is in the Torah, and it is. It really is. And the Talmud will tell you that it's all based on the Torah. It's not. So you provide. It's like this guy tells me, this rabbi, conservative rabbi, told me when I first came to Atlanta over 20-something years ago. He says, "You know that the life after death isn't written in the Torah." I said, "Yeah, but it's written in different places in the scriptures, and especially in the Talmud." He says, "Well, Talmud is opinions of rabbis, and you know what? I'm also a rabbi, and sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I disagree with them." I said, "From the way you're talking, it sounds like you haven't studied much Talmud in your life." And he says, "Okay, I'll admit that." I said, "Oh, okay. As long as you admit that, then I know that we're dealing with somebody who has no idea." It's like a kid saying, "Who said that there's Mars out there?" Huh, that's ridiculous. I think there's no Mars. Who are you? I'm also a scientist. Oh, really? That's it's the same idea. The same thing. A guy who's an ignoramus telling me I haven't studied much Talmud, but I disagree with the rabbi. Who are you? So unless a person is familiar with what has been said until then trying to find things out of the Torah doesn't work. You got to base yourself on the work that has been done until now, and then you can say, well, now with all of these ideas and points, based on what I've seen, perhaps we can suggest this. And that's how it happens. And people are innovating till this day. And some of the Good Shabbos emails, not many of them, but a handful of them are things that, from my perspective, the way I see it. So many of them have sources, but most of them, I would say 99%, but there will be one or two here. That'll be my own way of seeing things. Just after I have studied every single commentary I can get my hands on and see how they've adapted it. Some of them might not have addressed this particular point that I've seen. I'm sure there's plenty out there that I haven't seen. And that's how it works. That's how it goes. Somebody wants to come and say, I don't agree with that. All right, listen. But I'm not going to say something that's opposed to what has been said already, because now that I've studied what they've said, I understand and make sense what they've said. How are you going to oppose that? So anyway, back to here. So when the sages suggest in the Talmud to read a word, differently than what it's saying, they're not saying go change the word. Changing the word is sacrilege. It's like giving birth to another spoon. That you don't do that. We never do that. That's absolutely against every single grain of studying. What it means is that since it's a silent letter, put it into there and see what comes up. And what comes up is not a change of the spirit of what Moses is saying. What does God want? And he wants it to fear. What he's saying is Moses is suggesting that if you want to have a fear of God, in other words, you want to have a presence of God around you, make those 100 blessings. It's not like something new. It fits into the whole context and to the spirit of what the words are saying anyway. And again, they're not telling you to change the word. They say, don't read it this way, read it that way. Not, therefore, leave behind what the Torah actually says. But what they're saying is, read it this way, and you get another perspective, another allusion to something else that Moses is suggesting. Later on, King David writes it out clearly about making the 100 blessings, as we discussed before, on page 34, all the way back to 34. It's footnote 31 on page 34. And it says 100 daily blessings. It says established every day upon the first occasion about the deriving benefits from the natural system of the world, we have to recite a blessing. This enables us to complete the required quota of reciting 100 blessings every day, beginning in the evening, continuing throughout the day. King David instituted this obligation because at the time 100 Jews were dying every day for no known reason. King David investigated, subsequently understood through divine inspiration, and therefore instituted that we recite 100 blessings every day. An allusion to this is found in a verse that refers to King David. It says, the word of the man elevated on high. The Hebrew word for on high. He was elevated on high. King David was a small guy, a small person, but he was elevated al gavor, upon the high. That word upon, al, is numerically equivalent to 100. In this way, the verse can be read as, the words of the man by whom 100 blessings were instituted. The Talmud states, one is obligated to recite 100 blessings each day. As the verse states, what does God ask of you? Only to fear God and to serve Him. Do not read the first word as ma, what, but rather as me'ah, 100. In this way, the verse can be read as an instruction. 100 blessings does God ask of you. In other words, by adding that one letter, we don't change the spirit of the verse. We are just helping us understand how to focus on fearing God. And that is through 100 blessings. All right, so now back to page 42. And let's start this paragraph again. Now, while Sarah corresponds to Malchut, which is kingship and sovereignty, the life of Sarah, that was 100 years, she lived 100 years, corresponds to the level of 100 and is associated with the 100 blessings one is required to recite each day. Thus, our sages said, do not read ma, which means what, rather me'ah, 100. For ma refers to Malchut. The word ma refers to kingship and sovereignty, as the Zohar, beginning through 127a, explains. Thus, the verse states how ma, mighty is your name throughout the world, throughout the earth. This is a different verse in Psalm number 8, I think. Yes, 57, Psalm 8:2. Ma adir b'chal ha'aretz. The word ma, how great, how mighty, how awesome is your name throughout the earth. Remember that word might and awe is like fearing God. That's the same context, the same spirit. How great, how awesome, how mighty is your name throughout the earth, says David, indicating that God's name, or Malchut, the source of vitality for all the worlds, including this lowly world in the form of Memale Kolaman, is identified as Ma, because he says that Ma adir shimcha b'chol ha'aretz, how mighty, how wonderful is your name throughout the whole world. That is well, he's saying a few things over here. First of all, that is the spirit of fear of God throughout the world. And that's connected to the 100. But also that word ma, because he uses that term, how or what might is this name throughout the earth, how, in other words, how great it is. He's also referring to the kingship of God, the rulership, the might of God. And the name, God's name, the name of God, he has all kinds of names. Has Hashem, Elokeinu, Elohim, Shakai, he has all kinds of names. The name, when you say generally the name of anyone is really external to the person. I don't need to call myself by my name because I am me. And you're also me. So unless you have a problem talking to yourself, you say, come on, Mel. Then
I admitted that.
so unless you have that, you don't really need to talk to yourself that way. You don't need to talk to yourself, period. But on the golf course. A lot of muttering. Well, the name though is created for someone else to be able to call you, to be able to identify each person. We each have a distinct name. So Josh Cohen is a problem because that's not very distinct. So you have to find Josh R. Cohen or Josh Cohen, the son of Mel Cohen, and then you have So you have to have some distinction so other people can identify you. But that's for other people.
Right. Isn't it at the same time your name comes from the essence of your soul?
Yeah, well, that's the purpose of a name is for other people to identify you. Yet the name does allude to the essence of the person, because each name, Hebrew name now, is an indication of who that person is. Your Hebrew name can tell me all kinds of things before I even know who you are. Thus, when I always tell the story, when I met somebody and she introduced me to her fiance, he says his name is Rob or something. I said, what's your Hebrew name? He says, Reuven. I said, look, I've just met you. I don't know you from a hill of beans, but I can tell you that you have a special quality connected to seeing, to sight, because the word Reuven, Reu means to see. And that's, Leah gave that name to see. He says, how did you know that I was an ophthalmologist? So your name tells a lot about that. A lot of information I get from people just by asking them their names.
Another Jewish doctor, surprise, surprise.
What?
I said another Jewish doctor, surprise, surprise.
Exactly. So a name can tell a lot about people. And your Hebrew name is very significant because it does tell. So it does really talk about the person's essence. And I've nary been wrong when I say to that person, "Oh, your name is so and so, so therefore you're." Wow, why? It makes them stop. I do this every time I go on these birthright trips. I have one session with them about the Hebrew names, and they are clamoring. They're lined up because they've never heard anything like this. And then I tell them this is what it means, and this is what you have. And they say, wow, I've tried to keep that a secret. And no secrets from me. No. Your name gives, the Kabbalah says that parents who give you a name, even if they're giving after some grandparent, it's actually it's a prophecy that parents have to give their individual children that particular name, which will allude to who they are throughout their lives. It's an indication of who they are. So, on the other hand, a name does tell us about the essence of a person. In fact, when a person, yesterday we spoke about the smelling salts, that the smell is the most spiritual of all because it's connected to a person's life. When a person is faint, God forbid, and then you put some smelling salts under their noses, or cholent, then it can revive them.
Hard to find cholent in the middle.
Anyway, so it's another thing one does is one calls out the name. Hey, wake up, Charlie! Hey, Charlie! You want to call the name because that is the word that you've used most often to that person because it's connected to the essence of the person. So true, a name does allude to the essence of a person. At the same time, though, a name is really a something that's there for someone else. It's there for a person to be able to identify. It's not there for you. You don't need that name. other people need to call you that name, and maybe other people need to know who you are through your name. But certainly other people need your name for identification purposes. So when you say name of God, it is the way God chooses to reveal himself in other words, to hide his essence and to reveal less of him. It's a garment. He expresses himself in different ways. So when you talked about the great name of God, which is Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, we don't even pronounce that name because it's so special, so holy. It's that group called the J Witnesses. We don't say that them, but because they've taken our name and the name of God and they've used it for some unholy purposes. But we don't pronounce God's name like that ever, not ever, ever, ever. Only in the temple they did that. But the other, and then that is a reference to God's essence. But the other name of God, like the name which is substituted, Adon, Adon means the master. So in Hebrew, even today, modern Hebrew, we can use the word Adon, meaning sir. Adon Lu, Sir Lu, or whatever.
Now, why won't you say it now, but you'll say it in the Siddur when we're reading the Siddur?
Because it's a holy name of God, and we only say it when we
prayer.
in prayer or whatever. We try not to say God's name in vain. We have that thing in vain. Or even though that's talking about swearing in God's name, but still we try and respect the name by not saying it when we're not reading it from the verses or whatever. Then there's another name of God, Elohim, Elokeinu, and again I'm saying it with a k, but it's pronounced it with a h. Elohim. Again, I don't want to say the name, but that is a reference to God's justice. And then you have the name that's on the back of the mezuzah, Shakai, and that's a reference to God's involvement with the world. And then you have the name Kale, or it's like ginger ale. I don't want to. In ginger ale, you can say it, but when we say it with God's name, we say Kale. We don't want to say that. And that's a reference to God's kindness. And that's why right before the word merciful in the 13 attributes of mercy, you have that name, Kale. And so on. There are different ways of God revealing himself to the world, but it's not God's big major revelation. It's a revelation in a specific manner, which means it's limited to that. And since it's limited to that, it's actually hiding God's essence. Just like a name that reveals your essence, but it's really for someone else. It's not for yourself. It's not your essence. It can tell you about your essence, but it can tell you only, a couple of things about who you are. But it's not you. So, back to here. When you talk about God's name, you're talking about God's lowest level of the energy, which projects God into the world, or the next world, or this world. The lowest level projects, and that's like a name because it projects, it reveals God. At the same time, it only reveals one aspect of God. Only that level that God wants to reveal himself. So it's the lowest level, but it's a revelation level. Because it's lower, it could be revealed. That's what he's saying over here. So when
Can I ask a question?
oh sure.
So if it ends in im, that's really indicating that it's more, or that it's something that's being done. So the first part of the word and then it ends in im means that it's.
And it ends with him, that makes it plural.
Yes.
And the reason why that name is plural is because that name numerically is equivalent to the word hateva, the nature. That is the name in the beginning. The third word of the Torah is Elohim. Because when God, in the first chapter, all you have is that name. You don't have any other name. The truth is, the name of creation is not that name. The name is the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav, the great name of God. That in that name is the word create. And in fact, created, creates, and will create. It's all in that name. All three elements. He was, he is, and he will be. All in that one name. But he doesn't use that name until chapter 2. And the reason is because he created this world with a concealment. That's justice, that's might. To hide something takes a greater effort than to reveal. And therefore, the first chapter is how everything is created in this world. It's all about hiding God in the nature. So the name of God actually is equivalent to the word the nature. The nature is God, and God is the nature, except that it's hidden in the nature. That's why it's plural, because it's all over the place. So when King David says in Psalm number 8, and this is how he finishes this paragraph here, how mighty is your name throughout the earth, he indicates that God's name, which is Malchut, the lowest level, as I mentioned before, because that's the revelation, the source of vitality for all the worlds, including this lowly world in the form of Memale Kolamin, is identified as Ma. What? What is it? And Memale Kolamin means the way God fills all the world. In other words, the natural, normal projection of energy that is available everywhere. The nature. That means no extra added godliness, no extra revelation, just the way it is. What we have and what the animals have and what every kingdom in this world has. And as I've mentioned many times, that's the general, natural, normal level of godliness. We don't have to work for that. That's here. What we want to tap into is the deeper, higher, more spiritual, more godly level of godliness, which is why we make 100 blessings and why we try to get closer. We pray to connect to God, that we should be able to be connected to the much more intense and higher level of godliness. All right, we'll have to stop here. We may go over this chapter again, this paragraph again next week, but we'll be a little faster than today.